March 6, 1944, 11:02 a.m., over central Germany, 26,000 feet above the clouds. The sky is already crowded with contrails. Silver streaks carve white scars across the blue as hundreds of B-17 flying fortresses push deeper into the Reich than ever before, where engines roar in staggered formation, propellers churning cold air into violence. Flak bursts blossom like black flowers around them, tight, accurate, lethal. Inside one bomber, a waist gunner grips frozen metal and whispers a prayer he doesn't remember learning. Not German fighters. Something else. Long-nosed, sleek, fast. They slide into formation alongside the bombers like silent guardians. Wings rocking, sun flashing off polished aluminum. P-51 Mustangs. And for the first time in the war, American fighters have followed the bombers all the way to Berlin's doorstep. Far below in the pine-choked forests of East Prussia, Adolf Hitler is laughing. Deep inside the concrete belly of the wolf's lair, the Führer paces beside a massive table covered in maps and colored pins. His voice echoes sharply in the bunker air as intelligence officers report Allied losses from previous raids. He is animated, mocking, energized. "Your so-called escort fighters cannot reach our cities," he sneers. "They run out of fuel like frightened birds." Around him, generals nod carefully. Hermann Göring, bloated and rigid in his uniform, allows a thin smile. The Luftwaffe still claims the skies over Germany. The bombers come, the bombers die. That has been the pattern. Then the door opens. A communications officer steps in, pale, shaking slightly. Mein Führer. Enemy fighters are still present over the capital. Hitler stops pacing. "What do you mean still present?" The officer swallows. "They are not turning back. They are escorting the bombers the entire way." Silence spreads across the bunker. The laughter is gone. 6 months earlier, this moment had been unthinkable. American bombers had been flying into slaughter. Over Schweinfurt, Regensburg, Bremen waves of B-17s and B-24s were ripped apart by German interceptors once they flew beyond the protective umbrella of short-range Allied fighters. The reason was simple. No fighter could go the distance. The P-51 Mustang was never meant to save the daylight bombing campaign. It was born out of desperation and improvisation designed in record time. It's modified relentlessly and finally unleashed only after engineers bolted massive external drop tanks beneath its wings. With those tanks, the Mustang could fly further than any escort fighter in history. And more importantly, it could fight at the end of that distance. Back over Germany, Luftwaffe scramble calls erupt across airfields. Pilots sprint for their Messerschmitt Bf-19s and Focke-Wulf 190s. Climbing into cockpits they've flown since boys. They know their role: punch through the escort, tear into the bombers, break the formation, kill the Americans. But as they climb through the cloud layers, something feels wrong. Radar screens show fighters where no fighters should be. They're waiting. Captain Don Gentile of the 4th Fighter Group nudges his Mustang into a dive. His Merlin engine screams as the aircraft surges forward like a living thing. Another Mustang does. High above Berlin, the sky becomes a blender of motion and fire. Contrails twist into knots. Tracers arc upward in glowing chains. Cannons bark, machine guns chatter. Fighters roar past so close that pilots glimpse faces through canopies. German aces who once hunted bombers with impunity now find themselves hunted. For the first time in the war, the Luftwaffe is being intercepted over its own capital. Inside the Wolf's lair, updates arrive in fragments. Losses. Unexpected losses. Entire squadrons shattered mid-sortie. Hitler says nothing. Göring begins to sweat. The German pilots feel it first. The shift. They climb to attack and find Mustangs already above them. They dive to escape and find Mustangs below them. When they turn toward the bombers, the escorts don't peel away. They stay. They follow. A German squadron leader radios his wingman as Mustangs burst through their formation. Heartbeat later, his transmission cuts out. On the bombers, gunners stare in disbelief as German fighters peel away under relentless escort pressure. For the first time since the air war began, bomber crews feel protected all the way in. Not at the border, not halfway. All the way. By evening, The truth is unavoidable. The Americans have solved the escort problem. The Reich skies are no longer safe. And Hitler, who once laughed at the idea of long-range fighters, now stares at the map in silence. Because this wasn't just another raid, it was a declaration. The Americans could now reach anywhere, anytime, and they were only getting started. By nightfall, Göring quietly issues an order no one would have believed just days earlier. Germany's top fighter aces are to avoid daylight combat unless absolutely necessary. The predators have become the prey. And the hunters now wear American stars, because what appeared over Berlin that day was not just a new fighter, it was the collapse of German air superiority, the beginning of the end for everything beneath it. The next morning, March 7th, 1944. Before dawn, somewhere over occupied France, a thin violet line creeps along the horizon as American ground crews move like ghosts beneath rows of waiting Mustangs. Frost glitters on wings, breath fogs the air. Engines cough alive one by one, the sound building into a rolling thunder. The pilots climb in knowing something has changed. Yesterday, Berlin wasn't a suicide run. Yesterday, they stayed. The Luftwaffe fields across Western Germany, the mood is different, tight, silent, uneasy. Young pilots who once watched veterans swagger back from kills now lace their boots with trembling hands. They have heard the rumors from yesterday's battle, have seen the empty dispersal pads, its entire flights that never returned. And the older men, the survivors of Spain, Poland, France, those who once dominated, the sky no longer joke in the briefing rooms. They study silhouettes of a new enemy. Long nose, laminar wing, drop tanks, P-51. The second wave of raids punches in from the west. Just after 10 a.m. this time, the Luftwaffe meets them in force. Hundreds of German fighters claw for altitude in one last attempt to regain control. Radar stations track the bomber streams. Commanders on the ground issue crisp, desperate orders. Break the escorts, kill the bombers, save the Reich. Above 25,000 feet, the Mustangs are already waiting. Colonel James Bud Anderson tilts his aircraft into the sun and scans the sky. He spots the Germans' first dark specks climbing hard below the bomber box. He keys the mic. Bandits at 2 o'clock low. Let's go get them. The Mustangs tip forward in unison. Gravity does the rest. The attack is surgical. The Americans don't scatter. They don't chase recklessly. They dive through the German formation in high-speed slashing passes, firing only when the shot is guaranteed. A burst. A flash. A roll away. Another burst. German pilots try to fight back, but they are losing the geometry of the battle. Every time they commit to one Mustang, another appears on their tail. For years, this was how Luftwaffe aces fought. Now it's being done to them. A young German pilot named Franz Keller rolls desperately to shake a Mustang off his six. The American stays glued to him through every turn, matching him perfectly. Keller's fuel warning light flickers. He is still climbing. The Mustang fires. The world explodes in shattered glass and flame. Within minutes, German resistance fractures. Some pilots break for the clouds, some dive for home. Some never escape at all. And above it all, the bomber stream grinds forward untouched. Inside the Wolf's lair, reports stack up fast. Interceptions failing. Fighter units requesting emergency withdrawal due to fuel shortages. Hitler listens, stiff-backed, hands trembling at his sides. Göring offers excuses. The pilots are exhausted. The weather is affecting coordination. As these new fighters, Hitler cuts them off. Then where are yours? Göring has no answer. The Mustang has changed the physics of the air war. Before a time favored Germany, bombers arrived alone. Fighters waited at known interception points. Combat had a rhythm. Now, the rhythm is gone. The Americans choose when and where to fight, and they never leave the bombers. Back over Germany, the damage begins to compound. Not just aircraft, but pilots. Germany can still build planes. What's running out of is experience. Every Luftwaffe ace loss takes a decade of training, combat instinct, and battlefield intuition with him. Placements arrive with barely 150 flight hours, sometimes less. They face men with thousands, and they die quickly. By late March, the United States Army Air Forces have a new mission doctrine: seek out and destroy the Luftwaffe in the air. The Mustangs now fly ahead of the bombers, not just beside them. They sweep airfields. They strafe runways. They ambush climbing interceptors before they form up. The Germans call it the Blue Terror because the sky is now full of blue-nosed Mustangs. At one shattered airfield near Magdeburg, wrecked Messerschmitts burn in rows after a morning sweep. Fuel trucks lie ripped open. Hangars smolder. Mechanics lie dead beside tools they never finished using. Luftwaffe captain stares at the ruins and whispers the unthinkable aloud. We can't stop them anymore. And with every successful escort mission, American confidence swells. Bomber losses plummet. Raid sizes grow. Targets grow bolder. Synthetic fuel plants. Ball-bearing factories. Rail hubs. Marshall yards. Factories the Germans once believed untouchable under daylight conditions are now being smashed in broad sunshine under perfect protection. On March 18, 1944, over 1,200 bombers strike Berlin in one of the largest daylight raids of the war. The Luftwaffe rises to meet them and is shredded. Again, inside his bunker, Hitler finally breaks the illusion. Daylight operations for Germany's best pilots are severely restricted. The Reich retreats into night. And that single order unthinkable a year earlier marks the quiet surrender of the German fighter arm. The Americans notice immediately. Skies once ruled by Iron Cross killers now belong to the stars. But the real consequence is only beginning to unfold, because with the Luftwaffe broken in daylight, nothing now stands between the bombers and the heart of Germany's war machine. The bombers are about to hit it harder than ever before. April 11, 1944, midday. 28,000 feet above central Germany, the bomber stream stretches from horizon to horizon, silver dots in endless formation. Engines droning like a mechanical ocean. Beneath them, Germany burns in anticipation. Factories, rail yards, fuel refineries, the targets that feed Hitler's war. For the first time since the war began, they are defenseless in daylight. In the lead ship of the first bomber group, a navigator checks his charts and steadies his shaking hands. He has flown 27 missions. He has watched friends explode beside him. He has smelled burned flesh inside oxygen masks. But today, something feels different. No contrails rising fast from below. No black dots swarming the formation. Only the steady shadow of Mustangs weaving above them like guardian spirits. Over the radio, a calm American voice cuts in. Red leader to all escorts. Sweep ahead. Let's keep it clean today. The Mustangs accelerate. What remains of the Luftwaffe scrambles anyway? Orders are orders. From shattered concrete strips and forest clearings, Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs claw upward through thin cloud and flak. But now the climb feels like a death sentence. They are spotted almost immediately. The Mustangs dive. Lieutenant Otto Weiss is 20 years old. He has 9 hours in actual combat. He's flying a borrowed aircraft from a unit that no longer exists. When he sees the Mustangs coming, his hands lock rigid on the stick. His instructor's final warning echoes in his head. Never turn with them. He turns anyway. His aircraft disintegrates in a heartbeat. Across the sky, the same story repeats over and over. German pilots never reach the bombers. Veterans try to rally the younger men. They're ignored. They're outpaced. They're overwhelmed. And each loss slices deeper into Germany's last reservoir of air power. Thousands of tons of high explosives drop through clear skies. Refineries erupt in chain reactions of fire. Rail yards vanish under rolling concussion. Assembly lines turn into molten chaos in seconds. The targets are not chosen at random. They are chosen to starve Germany of fuel, of transportation, of replacement parts, of time. Within weeks, the effects ripple through every branch of the German military. Panzer divisions report fuel shortages. Train deliveries stall for days, then weeks. Aircraft production falls behind schedule. The war machine, once terrifyingly efficient, begins to grind like sand-filled gears. Inside Berlin's command rooms, officers whisper a word that once meant execution. Air superiority is gone. Even Gring can no longer deny it. At a closed-door conference, he slams his fist into a map table. I asked for more jets. I asked for more fuel. I warned you this would happen. No one dares remind him that he once promised to stop the bombers with ease. The room stays silent. Meanwhile, the Mustangs keep coming. The bomber crews begin marking off missions not with fear but with anticipation. One American pilot sums it up weeks later in a letter home. But victory in the air brings consequences on the ground. With Germany's industrial spine breaking under sustained bombardment, Hitler grows more desperate. He pushes forward his last reserves. His final gamble, a massive ground offensive in the west. One last roll of the dice meant to split the Allies apart before Germany collapses entirely. The world will come to know it as the Battle of the Bulge. And in that frozen forest, the Mustang's shadow will stretch even farther than anyone yet realizes. Because air superiority doesn't just decide the skies. It decides everything beneath them. December 16, 1944, 5:30 a.m., Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow smothers the trees like burial cloth. Frost locks rifles to frozen hands. U.S. sentries barely hear the first German artillery rounds before the forest explodes into white fire. Panzer columns surge through mist-choked valleys, headlights taped, engines roaring low and hungry. Infantry ride the armor like ghosts. For a few days it works. The clouds are thick. The Mustangs are grounded. German armor smashes through thin American lines at dawn's edge. Bastogne is surrounded. Fuel is nearly gone. The German command begins to believe just for a moment that the impossible might still happen. Then the weather breaks. December 23rd, 10:14 a.m., and the Mustangs return. You hear them before you see them. High, sharp engine notes slicing through frozen air, and streaks of silver dive through sunlight and cloud. The pilots today are not escorting bombers, they are hunting roads. Captain Don Gentile rolls his P-51 upside down and dives toward a German convoy, corkscrewing through a narrow forest pass. Panzer IVs, half-tracks. Fuel trucks improvise from civilian tankers. The convoy commander looks up and sees death accelerating. Machine guns rake the head of the column. Fuel trucks erupt into rolling fireball domes. Panther slews sideways. Tracks shredded. Turrets still searching for a target that no longer exists. Mustangs tear through in wave after wave, unchallenged. Only smoke. Across the bulge, the pattern repeats endlessly. German units that broke through American defenses under cloud cover are now pinned in open snowfields with nowhere to hide. Every movement is visible. Every concentration becomes a target. The sky belongs entirely to the Allies now, and the ground will pay the price. Field Marshal von Rundstedt, racing between collapsing positions, watches columns burn from his staff car. This is no longer an offensive, he mutters. It is a massacre. Inside Bastogne, surrounded American paratroopers watch Mustang/German lines with almost religious relief. Food and ammunition finally fall from the skies in parachute bundles. Wounded are evacuated, order resupplied. The siege cracks. At German headquarters, the truth can no longer be hidden. Fuel shortages stall entire armored spearheads. Supply trucks burn faster than they can be replaced. Bridges are cratered daily. Even retreat becomes nearly impossible under Mustangs circling like steel vultures. And deeper inside the Reich, the consequences of losing the skies grow catastrophic. January 1945. Synthetic fuel plants across Germany are now skeletal ruins. Railway junctions resemble lunar landscapes. Assembly lines sit silent under collapsed roof beams. Jets are being built, but there is no fuel to fly them, no transport to deliver them, no trained pilots left to master them. Hitler rages in his bunker. He orders impossible counterattacks. He demands aircraft that cannot be fueled. He shouts about betrayal, not reality. For the American pilots, the war has transformed entirely. They no longer think in terms of survival alone. They think in terms of domination. They sweep ahead of columns. They strafe retreating German units at will. They knock out radio masts, bridges, locomotives, bridges again. Anything that moves is fair game. One Mustang pilot later recalls, "We stopped seeing them as an air force. They were just targets. It's everywhere." By February, the bulge has collapsed completely. The Germans are driven back to their start lines or worse. Hundreds of tanks lie frozen where they died. Entire divisions break down into scattered foot columns, stumbling east under constant air attack. And now the road to Germany lies open. with no meaningful Luftwaffe left to resist them. March 1945. Mustangs now escort bombers, not just to Berlin but beyond it. They strafe airfields deep inside the Reich, blowing up aircraft on the ground before they ever take flight. They hunt the last jet squadrons during takeoff and landing, when speed means nothing. The Me-262 proves that technology alone cannot win a war. Not without fuel. Not without pilots. Not without control of the air. Across Europe, Allied armies surge forward under clear skies that belong entirely to them. The Reich no longer breathes freely. Every breath is taken under the sound of American engines overhead. Not from bombs, not from tanks, not even from the skies. It will come from inside Hitler's own shrinking world. Deep beneath Berlin, April 30th, 1945, Sendenzenschwufen p.m. Vorbunker, Berlin. Above the shattered Reich Chancellery, Allied aircraft no longer even bother to descend aggressively. There is no danger left in the air, no challenge, only routine patrol. Down below, in a concrete tomb shaking from distant artillery, Adolf Hitler sits in silence. The man who once laughed at the Mustang hears nothing now. Not engines, not reports, not hope. It did not simply defeat the Luftwaffe, it erased it. By the time American armor rolls across the Rhine, German skies are naked, no interceptors rise, no formations assemble. Runways lie empty or cratered. Jet fighters sit abandoned beside burnt-out fuel trucks, their futures starved before it ever arrived. Technology did not fail Germany, time did. On the roads of central Germany, retreating Wehrmacht columns stretch for miles-thin gray lines of exhaustion and hunger. They move only at night now. Even then, they are hunted by machine gun flashes ripping from the dark. By day, they freeze in forests or surrender entirely. Where once they fought through walls of flak and swarms of interceptors, now they fly through silence. Dresden already lies in ash, like the enemy had simply vanished. But the enemy hadn't vanished. It had been crushed into the ground by air power it could neither escape nor replace. Inside German airfields, the last pilots sit idle. There is no fuel to train, no planes to save. Meanwhile, the Allies move fast, because nothing stops them anymore. Not from the air, not from the ground. April 25th, 1945. American and Soviet forces meet on the Elbe River. Germany is split in half. The sky above them is empty of German markings. 5 days later, in Berlin's underground depths, Hitler ends his war the way he lived it, with denial. A pistol, final silence. The dictator who laughed at the Mustang never lives to see the Reich fully collapse. But collapse it does. May 7th, 1945. Germany surrenders. The war in Europe is over. They point to the sky. They point to the day American fighters flew farther than any enemy believed possible. They point to the moment bombers stopped dying alone. The P-51 Mustang did not win the war by itself, but it took away Germany's last shield, its last hope of protection. And once the sky belonged to the Allies, everything else followed. The Reich fell not just from bombs and bullets, but from the simple truth that in modern war, whoever owns the sky